The history of Deadzone Classic's most dedicated players spans back all the way to the game's birth in 2019. This game's competitive scene is something to behold, with players who have dedicated thousands of hours into practicing the gunplay and mechanics of PvP in Roblox's most toxic game. This history can be categorized into 3 generations over the course of 6 years, with dedicated and toxic players inhabiting each one. Generations are defined by the impactful players of that time, the powerful clans of that time, and any notable achievements by the community collectively. Today we are only going to be focusing on the important players of each generation. So without further ado, let's start from the beginning. As I said in this video, which you should check out by the way, when the game first released, a massive surge of players came for a short time. Meanwhile, certain players were actually grinding for stats. One such player was civillianinbox. Widely considered a legend, Civilian does not play anymore, but during the first generation, he set the record for the most player kills that stuck for multiple years. Civilian was the first player to reach 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and even 4,000 player kills, all before anyone else. Civ eventually quit the game out of boredom because he had been grinding so much, but his legacy still stands today. His old videos are still on YouTube for everyone to see how great he really was, too. He even killed me a few times, and I believe Civilian is the most skilled Deadzone player to ever touch the game. He was a pioneer of modern card combat today, and honestly shaped how competitively players fight. Many players like myself began playing Deadzone Classic during the first generation, but didn't make an impact in the community until the second generation, which by many is considered the prime of Deadzone's community. With this in mind, there is not many records of legendary players who were in their prime during the first generation. There are a few, but those records have been lost to time. The first generation housed the first clan of DZC, the Dropback Bandits. However, the majority of members did not make any significant impact on the game besides collectively killing new players for fun, which is still a long-standing tradition, similar to 2B2T's tradition of doing so. The prime of Deadzone Classic, 2021 to around 2023. So many legendary players with hundreds or thousands of kills all coming together to fight and celebrate complete freedom from any moderation. This freedom meant that being toxic and hacking was typical, and the player base got used to it. This environment produced an insane amount of legendary players, so many that I couldn't even list them all if I searched the very back of my memory. Instead, I will be mentioning players who, according to many, were the kings of the second generation. Glory, Flurry WZ, and myself, Evan PAQ. Let's start with Glory. Glory is considered one of the most skilled PvPers in Deadzone Classic and often clipped himself killing highly skilled players at the time and posting them on YouTube. He even clipped me a couple of times. Glory had a background in the streets, another well-known toxic community on Roblox. Glory was known to win fights against hackers and teams often, which has cemented him in the PvP Hall of Fame. Glory was also a glitch finder and notably was the first player to ever build a bridge to the safe zone and walk there from the dead zone, which if you don't know, is a grueling and monotonous task that takes hours upon hours. Glory was an inspiration to many players who joined later on, and his impacts are still seen to this day with how players use certain fighting techniques. There is so much more to Glory's story, but I want to move on to Flurry now so that this video stays relatively short. Flurry, like many others, came to Deadzone Classic for the nostalgia kick, but ended up making a very massive community impact before he left. Flurry had a large background in Phantom Forces and was highly skilled at shooters in Roblox, so naturally, he grinded for stats very quickly like many others did. However, Flurry was also one of the biggest hackers on Deadzone and had access to exclusive scripts that nobody else had, including the only working God Mode script ever used in Deadzone's history. Allow me to give a brief explanation of hacking in Deadzone. This game has always had a problem with players using scripts to gain an advantage. However, unlike many games, Deadzone's old-fashioned and clunky gameplay made the majority of overpowered scripts not work, which is why the community has stood the test of time despite the hackers. There were also parts of Deadzone that allowed normal players to combat hackers, such as using cars to cause people's cheats to stop working, such as certain ESPs, hitbox expanders, and aimbots. This method of combating hackers was used mostly by Glory, who actually knew the best way to use cars against hackers. Flurry WZ was a notorious hacker, but unlike pretty much everyone who uses cheats, Flurry had a lot of restraint and did not abuse his hacks. He simply purged those who were rude to him or killed other hackers. Flurry also used hacks to build better bases and contribute to projects which made them exponentially easier to complete. With how much Flurry played and how much he did to engage with the other community members, he has gone down as a true legend in the Deadzone community. I'm going to be making a different video on my own personal story inside this community, so I will keep this brief, but like Glory and Flurry, I was in my prime during the second generation, both in skill level and with creating a legacy for myself and my teammates. I created the clan DTS, standing for Deadzone Tryhard Society, which eventually was renamed to TTK, Train to Kill. Any players of that time knew that name because of how much we played. I will admit I was never a very great Deadzone PvPer because my computer has never been great. So with this in mind, I focused on gaining power through numbers in my clan. I brought together Glory and Flurry, and together with the rest of our clan, we took control of the community, went to war with many other skilled players, created massive building projects, but slowly the clan died off. People got bored and lost interest in the game. Like Glory, there are many other details to my story, but today I want to credit other players' impacts in this community because it is quite interesting all that we have done. The third generation is considered the rebirth of Deadzone Classic, and it truly began when the developer Alfederate released an influx of updates which revived the game and, of course, brought about a new conglomerate of dedicated and toxic players. Target Eliminator was very similar to Glory in that he also was one of the most fierce PvPers to ever touch the game of Deadzone. He would often win against very skilled players and was loud about it. Target was so active and so skilled, he frequently got accused of hacking by many players in the community. However, he didn't. Target recorded clips of his skills as proof he didn't hack, which is what you're seeing right now in the background. Not only was he extremely fearsome player, he also contributed to the revival of the game by giving Alf suggestions for bug fixes and additions to the game when he came back. Eventually, another player got Target's main account banned permanently from the game. This ban was mainly due to the corrupt nature of the moderation that took effect when Alf came back, and unfortunately, Target has had to play the game on an anonymous alt. Despite this though, he still remains one of the most fierce PvPers to this day. On a different side of the incredible Deadzone figure spectrum, there's Modify, also known as Corvette. Modify did not put his focus into being the best fighter and instead worked on social engineering and developing powerful connections with everyone he could. Modify made his own clan, which turned into one of the most defining clans of the third generation, the Astral Guardians. Complemented with its own anthem and members from across the community, Modify consolidated a vast amount of power, however, was punished for the exact thing this community celebrates, being toxic. Unfortunately, in a similar way to how Target was banned, Modify was banned by a corrupt moderator and effectively quit the game afterwards. Today, many new players have made names for themselves, so many that the current period of time could be considered the fourth generation, not only because these players, but because of the current clans, the recent abandonment of the game by the developer Alfederate, and the increasing decline of moderation. These are just a few of the literal hundreds of dedicated and toxic Deadzone players, so if you want to learn about more players in the future, be sure to leave a like and subscribe.